For nearly 2 decades in the heart of St. Louis, behind home plate in Busch Stadium, there stood a wall. Not of brick and mortar, but of firm determination and unflinching defensive skill and baseball intelligence. That wall was, of course, Yadier Molina, or Yadi, to legions of adoring Cardinals fans. Yadi wasn't your typical Hall of Famer. He wasn't ridiculously athletic, his bat wasn't always the best, and you'd be hard-pressed to find a slower base runner. But behind the plate, that's where the magic happened. We're talking about laser throws that shut down opposing base stealers dead in their tracks for almost 2 decades. A glove that seemed to snag everything, then yank it into the strike zone, and a mind that could call a game like a symphony conductor. Over his illustrious 19-year career, all with the Cardinals, Yadi played a key role in the team's 2 World Series championships, helping his team get to the postseason 13 times in those 19 years. The 2,184 games he spent behind the plate represent the most caught by any player for a single team in baseball history. Add to that 10 All-Star nods, 9 Gold Gloves, 4 Platinum Gloves, and 1 Silver Slugger Award, and you truly do have one of the most impressive bodies of work by any catcher in Major League Baseball history. But despite his numerous awards and milestones reached, it really was the less quantifiable aspects of Yadi's game that set him apart from other catchers. And although we are getting better at measuring things like pitch framing or game calling, both sabermetrics and traditional scouts acknowledge that even these advanced statistics failed to capture the full extent of Yadier's abilities, especially going back to his prime, and what it meant to the Cardinals to have him on the field all of those years. Born in 1982 in Puerto Rico, Yadier was the youngest of 3 boys. Baseball was ingrained in Yadier's life from the start. His father, Benjamin Molina Sr., was an accomplished player himself, one good enough to be elected into the Puerto Rican Baseball Hall of Fame. He instilled a love for the game in his 3 sons. Each day after dinner, Benji Sr. would take his boys across the street to the park to train them in the fundamentals of the game into the late hours of the evening. Yadier's 2 older brothers, Benji Jr. and Jose, also became standout defensive catchers with lengthy big league careers. And believe it or not, the Molinas grew up in a community that was actually nicknamed the Village of the Squatters. It was a name meant to refer to the laborers in local sugarcane fields, but it now also suits the group of Major League catchers who grew up there. While not the biggest kid, Yadi did possess a special talent for catching. His strong arm and exceptional throwing accuracy caught the eyes of scouts early on. By age 16, he had grown into a 5'11", 220-pound body that was similar to that of his 2 older brothers. Still, Yadier's bat was not on par with his defense. One early scouting report on him read simply, "Defensive catcher, great arm, weak bat." But his catching skills and his Molina heritage were enough for the St. Louis Cardinals to make the 17-year-old a 4th-round selection in the 2000 MLB draft. Give him anything he wants. That was the advice the Cardinals scouting director received when he selected the catcher with the 113th overall pick. Yadi was ultimately given a $325,000 signing bonus, an amount higher than his slot had warranted. Yadier's rise through the Cardinals minor league system was steady, but not spectacular. He impressed coaches with his work ethic and defensive prowess, but his offensive contributions were still modest, and really not all that projectable. In 2004, the youngest Molina brother received his first big league call-up. The Cardinals were a team on the rise, led by young stars like Albert Pujols and Adam Wainwright. Yadier, just a few weeks shy of his 22nd birthday, made his debut in June. In his first game in the starting lineup, he had 2 hits and threw out the first of the 345 runners he would gun down in his career. Molina was mostly used as a backup to his future Cards manager Mike Matheny in his rookie season, but it was a great time to get his first taste of big league ball. Led by Pujols and Wainwright, along with other stars like Scott Rowland and Jim Edmonds, the Redbirds notched 105 regular season victories, capturing the NL pennant before falling to the historic Boston Red Sox in the 2004 World Series. Molina appeared in just 7 postseason games overall, but still managed to throw out future Hall of Famer Craig Biggio at second base in Game 4 of the NLCS against the Astros. Mike Matheny signed with the Giants the following offseason, leaving Molina as the default starting catcher in 2005, a job he would put in a vice lock for the next 17 seasons. His offensive production during this time remained modest, but his skills at leadership on the field seemed to grow exponentially. He also formed a potent battery with ace Adam Wainwright, with the communication and trust he inspired with his staff becoming a cornerstone of the Cardinals' pitching success. Despite slashing only .252, .295, .358 with a low 70 OPS plus in his first full season, Yadier announced his presence with authority behind the dish. In nearly 1,000 innings, only 39 base runners attempted to steal against him. He threw out 25 of those brave enough to try, an insanely impressive 64% caught stealing percentage. Most backstops are considered productive if they limit 25 to 40% of all base stealers. Yadi was already about doubly that good. The Cardinals won 100 games that season, but would fall in 6 games in the NLCS to a stacked Astros squad that would themselves end up falling to the White Sox in the World Series. The 2006 season was an interesting one for Yadi. While his defensive contributions were undeniable, his offensive production was the worst of his big league career so far. An OPS that had hovered around 700 the prior 2 years fell to 595, and he only managed to blast 6 home runs the whole campaign, despite playing in 129 games, a career high to that point. He finished the season with an abysmal OPS plus of 53, the third lowest in all of Major League Baseball among players with at least 400 plate appearances. The Cardinals, however, saw a long-term future with the young catcher leading their charge on the mound, and stuck with him game after game. That faith paid off handsomely, starting in that year's postseason. The turning point in Yadier's career at the plate seemed to come in the 2006 NLCS against the New York Mets. The Cardinals, who had won just 83 games, were heavy underdogs against the 97-win Mets, led by future Hall of Famers like Tom Glavine and Pedro Martinez. In the top of the ninth, the teams were tied in a decisive Game 7. Cardinals third baseman Scott Rowland lined a single to left field. Despite having some bats on the bench, Cards skipper Tony La Russa elected to keep his light-hitting catcher in to hit, as the game looked likely to go into extra innings. The still baby-faced Yadier stepped up to the plate with a chance to give the Cardinals the lead. He would end up delivering a clutch 2-run home run, swatting the first pitch he saw into the left field bullpen, propelling the Cardinals to victory and another World Series appearance. It was from this point that Yadier wouldn't post an OPS plus under 80 in a season until his last year at age 39. The Redbirds went on to easily defeat the Detroit Tigers in 5 games to win the World Series that year, with Molina hitting .412 in the series, including 3 hits in the final game off a young rising ace in Justin Verlander. By the time Yadier embraced Wainwright on the mound after the final out, he had cemented his place as a fan favorite and key contributor to the team's success. Over the next decade, he established himself as one of the best defensive catchers in baseball history, if not outright the best. He won the Gold Glove Award a staggering 9 times, including 8 in a row. As we said in the intro, his ability to call games, frame pitches, and control the running game was unmatched. More on that in a minute. And as Yadier matured, so did his offensive contributions. He began to hit more like he had in the 06 postseason. In 2007, Molina slashed .275, .340, .368, raising that to 96 the following season to go along with his first over .300 average at .304. In 2009, Molina was named as an All-Star for the first time, as he had came to be regarded as one of the most consistent players in the game by this point. It was in 2011, during Molina's 8th year in the big leagues, that he finally established himself as a real threat in the box as well as behind it. These included personal bests in home runs at 14, RBIs at 65, and batting average at .305, not to mention a 124 OPS plus, making him almost 25% better than a league average hitter. He was, without question, one of the most valuable players in baseball overall. The Cardinals won the World Series yet again, defeating the Texas Rangers in a thrilling 7-game series. Yadier, despite his low start in the Fall Classic, as he went hitless in his first 2 games, came alive with a vengeance in the final 5. During that span, he had .471 with 9 key RBIs. Following the Cardinals' victory in the World Series, Molina received a 5-year contract extension worth $75 million. All in all, Molina certainly lived up to the expectations of the deal, emerging as a strong candidate for MVP in both 2012 and 2013. In 2012, he experienced the best offensive season of his career to that point, hitting 22 home runs with 76 RBIs and an impressive 137 OPS plus. Combining this offensive performance with his unwavering defensive abilities, and Molina's BWAR ended up being 7.2, second only to another catcher, Buster Posey, in the National League. This led to him finishing top 5 in MVP voting for the first time in his career, coming in at a strong 4th overall. In the first year under new manager and former teammate Mike Matheny, the 2012 Cardinals advanced to the National League Championship Series before losing to the San Francisco Giants in 7 games. Molina himself had a standout performance in that series, batting .393, but at the end of the day, it wasn't quite enough. Yadi's bat continued to shine alongside his defense in 2013. That season, Molina launched 12 homers to go along with the 129 OPS plus, his 3rd straight season over 120, and a 6.2 WAR, another elite total for a catcher. This time he placed 3rd in MVP voting, with the Cardinals winning the pennant before ultimately falling to the Red Sox in the World Series. This would be the closest the Redbirds would ever get to winning another championship with Molina. Having delivered 3 outstanding offensive seasons in a row to go along with his consistently outstanding Gold Glove caliber defense, Yadier earned a spot on the cover of Sports Illustrated 2014 preview issue. That season he was selected for a 6th consecutive All-Star game, but injured his right thumb and ended up missing 40 games after a rough slide into 3rd base. He finished with just 7 homers and a .386 slugging, his lowest total since 2010 in both categories, but he still managed to maintain his exceptional defensive abilities, helping him to post a still impressive 3.2 WAR. The Cardinals won the NL Central before losing to the Giants in the NLCS, marking the 3rd consecutive defeat to the Giants in the postseason. Molina would never again reach the offensive heights of 2012 and 2013, posting an OPS plus of just 80 in 2015, before rebounding to a respectable 111 in 2016. But beyond his individual accolades, Yadier remained a true leader for the Cardinals. He was a vocal presence in the clubhouse, a mentor to younger players, and the emotional heart and soul of the team. His on-field intensity and fiery competitiveness were infectious, inspiring his teammates to play their best consistently, especially the Cardinals' crop of young pitchers. There are a few players who have been more beloved by their home fans than Yadier Molina. After all, they had witnessed his growth from a backup catcher on the 2004 World Series team to a starting catcher who had struggled with his hitting to a premier defensive catcher and offensive threat who was considered a serious contender for an MVP. Now, they were watching him build a solid Hall of Fame case. It's also worth noting the historic partnership between Molina and Adam Wainwright during this time. The careers of these two players are intertwined like no other duo in baseball history. Together they made 328 regular season starts, breaking the previously held record of 324, set by the Tigers' Mickey Lolich and Bill Freehan. The narrative of the St. Louis Cardinals of the 21st century cannot be told without mentioning both Wainwright and Molina together. By the late 2010s, Father Time had started to catch up with Molina. From 2017 through 2019, his age 34 to 36 seasons, Molina was an average hitter for a catcher with respectable power, putting up an average OPS plus of 95 over those 3 seasons. Because of his somewhat declining defensive metrics, however, his average WAR in these years declined to 1.6. However, his leadership and experience remained valuable assets, especially in the postseason. 13 years after his glorious 2006 home run, Molina showed he still had a flair for the big moment. Despite hitting just 152 in the 2019 postseason, Yadier came up in Game 4 of the NLDS with the Cards down 2-1 to the Braves in a must-win game. In the 8th inning, the Cardinals were trailing 4-3. With 1 out and Paul Goldschmidt on second, Yadier stepped to the plate and delivered a soft bloop into right field, tying the game at 4. 2 innings later, Molina came up with Colton Wong on third and launched a walk-off sacrifice fly to win the game and forced a Game 5, which the Cards promptly won. They wouldn't end up winning a title, but that moment still gave a new generation of St. Louis Cardinals fans their own memorable postseason Yadi moment. In the years that followed, Yadi would end up notching some pretty impressive career accomplishments, especially for a catcher. In 2020, Molina became just the 9th backstop to rack up 2,000 career hits. The following year, he caught his 2,000th game behind the plate, becoming the 6th catcher ever to do so, and the very first to do so with a single franchise. Poetically, it was Adam Wainwright who ended up starting on the mound for that one. Then, in his final season in 2022, a 39-year-old Molina caught a pop-up off the bat of the Pirates' Brian Hayes. It was his 14,865th put-out as catcher, passing Ivan Pudge Rodriguez for the MLB record. He announced his retirement after that season, walking away as a 2-time World Series champion, a 9-time Gold Glover, and one of the most respected players in baseball history. He singled in his final postseason at-bat in the 2022 Wild Card Series that the Cards lost to the Phillies. It's also worth mentioning that throughout his career, Yadi remained deeply connected to his Puerto Rican roots. He represented his homeland with pride in the World Baseball Classic, leading them to 2 second-place finishes, including notching his now iconic heads-up play where he nailed a runner celebrating prematurely. This play represented him as a player well, always heads up, always focused, and consistently game-changing defensively. When all was said and done, Yadier Molina was a 10-time All-Star, a 9-time Gold Glove winner, a key contributor to 2 World Series championships, one of the greatest framers of all time, and perhaps the greatest base-running deterrent in baseball history. So, should we be thinking about him as a potential Hall of Famer? The answer to that question largely hinges on just how good we think Yadier was behind the plate overall. Foolish Baseball already did an in-depth video on this, which we highly recommend you check out, but we'll do our best here at MTC to make our case as well. The main case against him is clearly his offensive numbers, which are good overall but not great. Sure, he's just the 8th backstop to eclipse milestones of 2,000 hits and 1,000 RBI, and the other 7 to do so are in the Hall of Fame. But when you take a closer look at Molina's production against some of the other players who had a minimum of 5,000 career plate appearances and at least 50% career games caught, it's not quite as impressive. Molina's career OPS plus of 96 ranks 40th, his 277 average ranks 24th, and his offensive WAR of 28 ranks 34th, with several contemporary catchers outranking him in that last category, including Jason Kendall, Joe Mauer, and Buster Posey, and those guys played significantly less games than Yadi to tally this cumulative stat. So, on the offensive side, Yadi doesn't really have an airtight case. First, a quick note on catchers more broadly, who tend to be underrepresented in the Hall of Fame. The demanding nature of this position is just so much more challenging than the others in the field. While offensive contributions are also expected from catchers, evaluating their performance remains difficult compared to these other position players. This has led many catchers to be kept out when they probably should have been let in because they were being compared to many other players who had a much better chance to put up offensive numbers at the plate because their positions weren't nearly as taxing. With that being said, how does Yadier stack up defensively? For starters, he earned 9 Gold Gloves, 3rd most all-time for backstops behind Ivan Rodriguez and Johnny Bench, both first-ballot Hall of Famers. Not too shabby. But we couldn't go really any time without talking about that arm of his. It was obviously elite, but just how well does his career caught stealing percentage of 40.3% stack up against the greats? To answer that, we need to give some context. The great defensive catchers of the 1970s and 80s, like Johnny Bench and Thurman Munson, threw out around 43 to 44% of all base runners. Higher than even Molina, right? But that was a different era. Base runners ran more then. The average caught stealing rate was around 35%, meaning a 65% success rate. In the modern era, teams have realized that running less and more successfully is a better approach, targeting around a 75% success rate. So, during Molina's career, according to Fangraphs, the average caught stealing rate in baseball was around 27%. This makes Molina's 40% about 48% better than the average catcher at throwing out runners. To put that number into context, that's not unlike having an OPS plus of 148 as a hitter over 19 seasons. That's certainly Hall of Fame caliber. You see, it wasn't just that he was so good at throwing out base stealers. He instilled so much fear in opposing players that many of them just ended up abandoning their attempt to steal altogether. His signature move involved throwing behind the runner, taking advantage of their momentary lapse in focus or alertness. And it worked. From the time Molina joined the Cardinals in 2004 until 2020, the team experienced the lowest number of stolen base attempts among all major league teams, compiling 500 fewer attempts than the next closest team. Cardinals pitchers were also just simply much better when Molina was behind the plate during this period. The team's pitchers achieved an ERA of 3.69 with Molina behind the dish. When Yadi wasn't present, the ERA increased to 4.12. That's a substantial difference of approximately 0.43 runs per game. That's, well, let's say an uncommon trait. Even other elite defensive catchers in baseball history like Johnny Bench and Bill Freehan had catcher ERAs that were significantly worse than this. Part of this may also be due to Molina's other superpower, pitch framing. This technique has come under increasing scrutiny in recent years. In response, Fangraphs and Baseball Prospectus even took the step of revising their WAR calculations for modern catchers, integrating the latest pitch framing metrics as a result. When Fangraphs released updated WAR figures for catchers, the new approach boosted Molina's career value significantly. As such, Yadi's career total F-WAR now stands at 55.7, a number that is the 10th highest among all backstops in baseball history, and noticeably higher than his career B-WAR, which remains around 42. Plus, both Fangraphs and Baseball Prospectus rank Molina first in their defensive runs above average components to their WAR calculations. So, in short, it's not an exaggeration to say that Molina is probably the best defensive catcher in baseball history, and a pretty great one overall even when considering his hitting. And hey, despite having some of those more mediocre offensive numbers overall, Molina did hit the best when it counted most, including a career average of 312 in 39 NLCS contests and 328 in 21 World Series games. One decent comparison for Molina is another great Cardinal, shortstop Ozzie Smith, the Wizard of Oz himself. Smith is regarded as one of the best shortstops to ever play the game, and while he too had his moments at the plate, including in the postseason, he was indeed not a stud. In fact, his career on-base percentage of .337 is roughly equal to Molina's .339. Did Ozzie Smith make it to Hall of Fame? Yes, on the very first ballot. And yes, we do value defense differently now, but Yadi was also certainly better at the plate overall than Ozzie was, especially for his position. Yadier Molina's story is one of dedication to his craft and an unwavering passion for the game. Forged over 2 decades, born into a baseball family and nurtured in the baseball-rich culture of Puerto Rico, he rose from a decent prospect with good but not insane potential to a legend behind the plate. His defensive prowess, leadership, and clutch play stood out in a way that few catchers ever have, putting up a body of work that could very well be considered the best ever defensively for a catcher overall. His key involvement in 2 World Series titles and numerous All-Star selections also contribute to his stature in the game. Sometimes, a player is more than the sum of their statistical achievements, and Yadier Molina is perhaps the perfect example of that player. All of this, and so much more than we could ever hope to break down in one video, is the reason that we here at MTC believe that there will never be another Yadier Molina. Now, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to like and subscribe, and check out this playlist for other essay content just like this. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.